Okay, welcome everybody to the third Business Grants webinar we've run. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Sean Collier. I'm the Senior Manager for Business and Enterprise for North Tyneside Council. And today we have Biram Kazali, the Senior Public Health Manager with us, and Karen Goldfinch, the Chair of the North Tyneside Business Forum. The format of today is quite brief, so we'll just go through a couple of presentations and have some questions. So first of all, we've got Biram giving some presentation on public health, then we'll take some questions. Then I'll give a brief presentation on the latest with the business grants system, and then again we'll have some questions which Karen will chair from the business forum and ask this question for us there. So I will go straight into it if that's okay. Over to you, Ben. I'm just going to share his presentation and then we'll get on with it there.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Sean. So like Sean said, my name's Biram Kazali. I'm Senior Manager in Public Health in North Tyneside, and I'm going to take you through a presentation just to give an overview of the current position in North Tyneside in terms of COVID-19 and also things that businesses and workplaces need to think about as we start to progress through the roadmap. So if you bear with us, I'll just share my presentation. And if Karen and Sean, if you can just let me know if you can see that.
Yeah, all good.
Yeah, that's all good. Right, we're ready to go. So like I said, I'm going to give you an overview of the current position in North Tyneside in terms of COVID-19. I'll touch on the roadmap in the presentation and also touch on things that businesses and workplaces need to think about as we progress through that roadmap. So I'll move on to my first slide. So in terms of North Tyneside, at the minute is a very positive picture for North Tyneside. We'll have declining rates in terms of the infection rate in line with the northeast. So currently in North Tyneside, our 7-day infection rate per 100,000 is 67.3. So we are below the rate for the northeast, which currently stands at 77.7. However, we are just above that average for England, which currently stands for at 57.1, but it's been a steady decline for North Tyneside, which is a positive picture. However, we mustn't become complacent, and some of the key public health messages that you'll have seen through lockdown will still remain important as we move along the roadmap. I'll go on to my second slide. So in terms of testing in North Tyneside, over the last 7 days, we've seen a total number of tests conducted, which equates to just under 31,000. Out of those 31,000, there's been 140 positive tests, which is a percentage positive of about 0.45%. So this is good because testing's at an all-time high. And one of the reasons that it is high at the minute, as you'll probably be aware, we have got testing going on in schools and in workplaces, so therefore there's a lot of data coming through which is indicating that we've got a lower community transmission. Testing is going to be important as we move along the roadmap, as testing will help with identify people quickly and hopefully be able to get people to isolate and reduce any further community transmission. So testing will be key, but it won't be the only factor that will be important as we progress. So if you look at the next slide, this gives an indication of all the cumulative cases that we've had in North Tyneside in terms of positive cases by ward, and this is up to date to the 23rd of March. So when you look at this map, as you can see that there's been an impact in all wards in North Tyneside. So COVID-19 has impacted across the borough. But what's interesting to note, where we do have some higher figures, we can see that there is a correlation between inequalities, where we've had higher numbers in certain wards. And that's something as a council and nationally that we'll be looking to address in terms of inequalities as we move forward. In terms of outbreaks, the data that we have on the slide at the minute shows you how many current outbreaks we have in schools, which is 15. We have current workplaces, which have 5 outbreaks, and in terms of care homes, we've got 3. In terms of the outbreaks, the council and public health provide support to those organisations that are going through outbreaks to give advice in terms of risk assessments, putting in place measures that will help to reduce the risk of transmission, all with the aim of trying to make either schools or workplaces or care homes COVID secure, so staff, pupils or customers can return as quickly as possible. Now, this is something we will offer if a workplace does go into an outbreak. We will offer support and try and guide businesses and workplaces in terms of how to control and reduce transmission. And that support will be offered at any time. In terms of testing for businesses, this will become important as we move along the roadmap. So what we need to remember is testing is a complementary tool and it's not a replacement for other important COVID-19 secure measures. So for example, social distancing, good personal hygiene and good ventilation are all key to helping to stop spread the virus and protect staff, customers and businesses. So testing will be key, but it's also important that you put in place other COVID-19 secure measures. So in terms of testing, what type of testing do we have? So the next couple of slides I'm going to take you through and hopefully explain the difference between asymptomatic testing and symptomatic testing. So there is a scheme called Workplace Collect. So this is asymptomatic testing for businesses. So asymptomatic is testing which is available for businesses or employees who do not have symptoms through a variety of routes. So the first option is using a rapid test called lateral flow tests or LFTs, which can give you a result within 30 minutes. We currently have a local asymptomatic test site, which is at the Riverside Centre, North Shields. So this is available to anybody who's unable to work from home. It offers a twice weekly testing for those individuals, and the presentation will be circulated later, but there's a link there where you can go on and book your place to go and get a test at the Riverside Centre. Businesses in North Tyneside can also sign up to receive free rapid LFTs for employees without symptoms through the government's workplace testing programme. And again, there's a link on the slide which you can click on to find out more. However, please be aware this depends on the size of your business. Tests will either be delivered to the workplace or the home. And what we would point out at the point of filming this webinar, we are aware that there's going to be some guidance released next week, and we will try and share that information once it comes through. But please be aware guidance does change quite regularly. So please try and stay up to date in terms of the guidance for workplaces on the gov.uk website. We'll move on to the next slide. So in terms of symptomatic testing, so again, symptomatic testing is for employees who are showing symptoms of COVID-19. So just to remind you, in terms of symptoms, it's if somebody has a new or continuous cough, a high temperature, or change in taste or smell. If an employee starts to develop these symptoms, you should go for a PCR test straight away. And even if you've had a negative lateral flow test, you still need to go for a PCR test. PCR tests, again, can be booked through the gov.uk website on the link on the slide. We have 2 test sites in North Tyneside for people that are showing symptoms, which are available. One is at the Parks Leisure Centre, North Shields, and one is in Coronation Street Car Park in Wallsend. But again, please be aware you've got to book an appointment to access those sites, and you can't just turn up. So again, by using the link on the slide, you should be able to book an appointment. Please note for symptomatic testing, lateral flow test kits must not be used by people who are showing symptoms. So if you have a symptom of COVID-19, please go for a PCR test and don't use a lateral flow test. In terms of COVID secure workplaces and risk assessments, There's a number of things that businesses need to consider to make sure that they're meeting several requirements. An up-to-date COVID risk assessment should be in place, which is shared with staff, and the risk assessment should cover a few areas in terms of identifying what work activity or situations might cause transmission of the virus, identifying who could be at risk within your workplace, decide how likely it is that someone could be exposed, and also identify actions to remove the activity or the situation. And if this isn't possible, think about how you can control that risk. We would encourage all businesses and workplaces to support the NHS Test and Trace app by showing the appropriate QR code, again, dependent on the type of business you've got. The ability for customers to be able to socially distance within your business or workplace is key. Also being able to ask customers and staff to wear face masks when required to do so by law, again, is key in terms of reducing the transmission or the spread of the virus. And another area which is key for all businesses and workplace is increasing cleaning and making sure there's good ventilation within workplaces. Again, that's just a quick overview. What I would recommend is that you go on the link below and you'll see more detailed guidance in terms of what you need to think about in terms of your workplace and your risk assessments. In terms of enforcement and compliance from North Tyneside Council, we will be visiting businesses where we receive complaints about breaches of COVID measures. And one of the first things that we would do is look at your risk assessment to make sure that it's been checked, to make sure that it's been updated and that you've considered all the COVID requirements. In addition to this, what we'd ask you to consider is the activity that you're conducting allowed at that stage of the roadmap? Or groups visiting your premises and the numbers gathering permitted at that stage of the roadmap, which we'll touch on? Will people be encouraged to queue? If they are, will this cause further social distancing issues? Again, there's a number of enforcement powers that the local authority can use and the police, but as always, we will try to work with businesses and workplaces to try and work with you, to try and work through issues that we highlight in terms of any breaches and give you the opportunity to put this right with our support and advice. However, if you would like any advice on compliance and the regulations, please contact me on the email on the slide. In terms of vaccination, this is key in terms of the roadmap, and you'll have all seen nationally that the UK has been performing very well in terms of the vaccination rollout. And in terms of North Tyneside, that's been mirrored. We've seen a very good vaccination programme being rolled out across North Tyneside, and that's focused on the first 9 nationally agreed priority groups. Vaccinations are currently being offered at the PCN hubs at the parks, the Langdale and the Oxford Centre in North Tyneside, and there is discussions about a national vaccination site being developed in North Tyneside. Again, we will release details once we have further information. The oversight of the vaccination rollout through North Tyneside is overseen by the North Tyneside COVID-19 Vaccination Board, and this steering group has also been established to help address inequalities and promote equity of the vaccination uptake. You may have seen in the news recently that there's been a lot of information from Europe around the safety of some of the vaccines that are currently out in circulation. What we would stress is that all the vaccines are safe and should be used, and that has been backed up by the DPHs in the North East, who released a statement last week, again saying that the vaccines are safe and that people, if they are offered them, should take them up and get yourself vaccinated. Again, this will help in terms of the roadmap and as we start to move towards the key date of the 21st of June. So the roadmap to recovery. There's 4 key tests which the government have announced that they will consider as we move across the roadmap, and there will be 5 weeks between each step, and that will allow the government to review the evidence to make sure that all the tests are being met, and that we can move to the next stage of the roadmap if the evidence suggests that all the 4 tests have been met. Obviously, if those tests aren't met, or the evidence suggests that there's pressures increasing on the NHS, for example, again, that might change the roadmap and dates might change. However, I'm probably, like everybody else, hopeful that won't be the case, but we'll have to see what happens. So in terms of the 4 tests, test 1 is around the vaccine deployment, which I've just touched on. Test 2 is the evidence which shows how vaccines are sufficiently effective in reducing hospitalizations and deaths. Test 3 is the infection rates. So again, if we see a surge in infection rates and hospitalizations, that test may fail, and if it does, that may affect our return or dates on the roadmap. Test 4 is the assessment of the risk posed by new variants of concern. So again, if there's any new variants that come into the UK that might be more transmissible, that might affect the roadmap as well. So these are the 4 key tests that will be reviewed every 5 weeks to make sure that the evidence is hopefully pointing in the right direction. If it's not, the government might make the decision to delay some of the key dates. So recovery in terms of step 1. So currently from the 8th of March, all schools could return. Outdoor after school sports and activities could resume. You're able to meet 1 person from another household outside for exercise. Care homes have been allowed 1 person to visit for residents. And from next Monday, we'll see a change again from the 29th of March in terms of outdoor gatherings of up to 6 people or 2 households in public areas or private gardens, which will be allowed. Outdoor sport facilities can reopen, and organised adult and children's sport and activities can resume. In terms of stage 2, so this is no earlier than the 12th of April. Non-essential retail can reopen. Personal care businesses can reopen, for example, hairdressers and nail salons. Indoor leisure facilities can reopen. Public buildings can reopen. Self-contained holiday accommodation, again, can reopen. Outdoor areas in hospitality venues will reopen with no curfews or need to buy a meal. And again, outdoor entertainment venues will also reopen. Funerals will continue with up to 30 guests and weddings up to 15 guests. So that's phase 2. So in terms of the recovery and step 3, we're looking at no earlier than the 17th of May. The rule of 6 will be abolished for outdoor settings, and that will be replaced with a 30 people limit. 2 households can mix indoors. The rule of 6 applied to hospitality settings indoors. Venues like cinemas, soft plays, hotel, performance and sporting events can reopen with social distancing in place. Larger events will be piloted with over 10,000 spectators able to attend in terms of large venues or seated venues which are outdoor, and up to 30 people can attend funerals, wakes, weddings and receptions. Step 4, and hopefully we get to this point, as I'm sure everybody hopes that we do. So no earlier than the 21st of June, we will remove all legal limitations on social contact. Restrictions on weddings and funerals will be abolished, and larger events will be able to take place. So again, as I mentioned earlier, there's different stages to the roadmap, and as a business, when you reopen, make sure you know the guidance in terms of those different stages and what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do, and make sure you stay in touch with the guidance on gov.uk, because it does change quite regularly. Finally, as I mentioned before, all the public health messages that were given to businesses and workplaces remain critically important as we move along the roadmap, and we don't want to become complacent. So messages around hands, for example, wash your hands with soap and water regularly, again, very important. Face, make sure you're covering your face when you're required to do so with a face mask or face covering. Again, space, think about maintaining the 2 metre social distance wherever possible. Limit social contacts wherever possible. If you have to self-isolate with your household, if you have symptoms, please do so and make sure you book a test. If you've also been in close contact with a positive case, make sure you self-isolate as well. All key critical measures that we need to make sure that we still carry out as we move along the roadmap. If we do, hopefully this will help us to get to the point on the 21st of June. And I'll finish there. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Bernard. That was really informative. I've just got a quick question. I'll pass on to see if Karen's got any as well. It was just around the testing for businesses.
Yeah.
I think there's a date on one of the slides who said register by the 31st of March. I was just going to check what the situation was there.
Yeah, so businesses do have to register online via gov.uk, and the deadline is the 31st of March. So I would encourage businesses to go on and get registered, but it does depend on the size of your business whether you can access that scheme. But if you go on the gov.uk website, all the details will be there.
Okay, I think after this as well, we'll try and put some of the contacts out as well and make sure they're available in the same place on the council's website and the business forum website, so it's easy for people. Karen, did you have any questions for Bernard?
Yeah, it was actually just on the same point that you raised there, Sean, because I see we've been putting information out there on our social platforms and what have you, and getting in touch with our members. But on the size of business, have you got the numbers there as to what the size of business is, just off the top of your head?
Off the top of my head, I believe if you've got a business with 50 employees or over, you can register for the scheme. However, we are aware, like I did mention on the PowerPoint presentation, that there's going to be new guidance coming out next week, and we think that guidance is going to focus on businesses that have got 50 employees or less, and that will give detail in terms of what businesses or workplaces can sign up to. I believe it is going to be LFT tests that they can access, which they'll be able to order. But again, I don't want to say too much because the guidance hasn't been released yet, but that is due next week. So if you've got a business where you've got under 50 employees, there'll be additional guidance coming out next week.
Great, so we'll keep a lookout for that, thank you. And you mentioned also about risk assessments, and we know we've been sending risk assessments out to our members, but it's important that they keep up with them, isn't it? Keep up to date with changes and things that are happening. So don't just do one when we first went to lockdown last year, keep on top of it.
So what I would say in terms of that as well, some of the businesses that we've recently supported where they've had outbreaks, sort of like on reflection, some of those businesses have said to us sort of like complacency set in. So they've had a risk assessment which they thought was fine, which at the time when they did it, it probably was. But guidance has changed and they haven't stayed up to date, and that might have contributed to an outbreak. So again, your risk assessment should be dynamic, should be constantly assessing it and making sure you're in line with the national guidance.
Lovely, thank you. And I've got one more, if that's okay. You mentioned you're doing visits, which we know you're going around visits and you know, making sure you're trying to keep everybody safe and go around to visit the businesses and what have you. You don't, I know you don't contact them first, do you? Or is there a case where the reason I'm asking this is quite a few texts going around at the minute which appear to be scams. I just want to make people aware that the texts that are coming out, majority of them are scam texts where they're saying we're coming to visit you next Wednesday or whatever. And there's a lot of people concerned about those, but that's not you, is it? You just go and make a spot visit.
Yeah, we will make a spot visit. And again, it does depend on the circumstances where we're getting intelligence from the public, which we have recently. We will go out and do a spot check. However, we have had businesses contact us directly, and then obviously we've arranged a time to go out and visit with those businesses. So we're not trying to catch anybody out.
Yeah.
What we want to do, it is a supportive approach, and we will try and support businesses to make sure if they have breached, that we'll try and support them to put that right. However, if businesses don't sort of like comply with our advice and guidance, we do have those measures from an enforcement perspective which we can use. But what I would say from a council perspective is we want to try and work with businesses and workplaces first, and we don't want to go down that route.
Yeah.
But obviously if we have businesses who are constantly sort of like ignoring advice or going against guidance, then we would obviously look to take enforcement action.
It's just trying to get everybody to look after their own premises and their staff, their customers, and their neighbours as well, for queuing outside, being responsible, and maybe looking at other ways of not encouraging large groups to queue outside, one in a queue perhaps.
And what I would say is, over the recent support we've given, we have picked up a number of themes and we have learned a lot. So we are sharing that advice with businesses when we're going out. So there is a lot of learning that we've found from workplaces that have had outbreaks, and there has been common themes. So again, all of that learning we're happy to share and support businesses with. Yeah,
and I have to say thank you as well, because we attend the COVID-19 engagement boards, and that information you've been passing through, obviously we pass through onto the business as well, and the whole team, you've been doing so much, and it's not a job that anybody would want to do. So thank you from the businesses for trying to help where you can. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,